I never thought I'd find myself staring down my stepmother in a sterile conference room high above the Chicago skyline. The glass walls reflected the city's relentless hustle, but inside the tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with every tick of the clock. My name is Sophia Ellis. I'm 32, the proud, if exhausted owner of a cozy little bookstore called Whispered Pages in Wicker Park. For the past 14 years, I've carved out my own corner of the world, far from the gilded cages of my father's penthouse in Manhattan. We hadn't spoken in ages, not out of hate, but because the walls between us had been built brick by brick, mostly by her. Rebecca, my stepmother, the queen of designer labels and calculated charm, who treated me like an outdated accessory she'd rather discard. Now she sat across from me, her manicured nails tapping the mahogany table, her smile sharp as a blade. She was sure the reading of my father's $200 million estate would go exactly as she planned. And honestly, so was I, until the lawyer flipped to that one page and paused, his eyes glinting with something unspoken. Before Rebecca, before the isolation and the endless slights, there was light. I grew up in a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, where the air always carried a hint of my mother's jasmine tea. My father, Jonathan Ellis, was a rising star in the tech world, founding a software company that would later explode into a Fortune 500 giant. But back then he was just Dad, tall with a laugh that filled rooms and hands that could fix anything from a broken bike to a scraped knee. My mother, Elena, was his anchor, warm, artistic, with a voice like velvet when she read me bedtime stories. We weren't swimming in money yet. Dad's company was just taking off, and our weekends were simple. Picnics in Prospect Park, Mom sketching charcoal portraits while I chased fireflies. I was 10 when the world cracked open. It was a humid summer evening in New York, the kind where the heat clings to your skin like regret. Dad was at a late meeting, so Mom and I were walking home from the library, our arms full of books. She was teasing me about my obsession with mystery novels when a taxi, swerving to avoid a pothole, jumped the curb. The impact was a blur, screeching brakes, Mom's hand shoving me out of the way, the thud that echoed in my bones. I hit the sidewalk hard, my elbow scraping raw, but Mom, she didn't get up. Her body lay twisted, the books scattered like forgotten promises. I screamed her name until my throat burned, but she was gone before the sirens arrived. The months after were a haze. Dad threw himself into work, his eyes hollowed by grief. I bounced between aunts and school friends while he traveled for deals. We tried to hold on, nights where he'd hug me tight and whisper stories about Mom, but the emptiness grew. Grief doesn't just break you, it reshapes you. Dad started staying out longer, coming home with a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume. I told myself it was nothing, that he was just coping. But deep down I knew a storm was brewing, one that would sweep away the last remnants of our old life. I was 12 when he introduced her. He'd returned from a conference in Silicon Valley looking alive again. Over pizza one night he mentioned someone special he'd met. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile. Her name was Rebecca Hayes, a venture capitalist half his age, with platinum blonde hair and a wardrobe straight from Fifth Avenue. Our first dinner was at a fancy spot in Midtown, linen tablecloths, crystal glasses. She wore a pearl necklace that screamed old money, and her questions about my school felt scripted, like she was auditioning for a role. She laughed at Dad's jokes with perfect timing, her hand lingering on his arm. I was too young to name it, but it was all performance. 6 months later they were engaged. The wedding was a spectacle, black tie in the Hamptons, guests Dad's new business crowd. From the day Rebecca moved into our upgraded Manhattan penthouse, everything shifted. She redecorated. Mom's cozy rugs replaced by sleek marble, jasmine scents overpowered by her citrusy cologne. Family photos vanished, swapped for modern art that looked like angry splatters. Dad changed too, suits sharper, conversations about synergies and networks. They threw galas weekly where I'd parade for photos, then vanish to my room. Then came the twins, Ethan and Ava, born when I was 14. Dad was ecstatic, every coo and crawl a headline in his world. My milestones? Barely noticed. Rebecca didn't bother hiding her disdain. "Sophia, darling, you could learn from Ava. She's already so poised at 3, she'd say, eyeing my jeans like they offended her. Or after I left a book on the counter, "Your father slaves away to give us this life. The least you could do is tidy up." The jabs were subtle, eroding me like waves on stone. I retreated. Library marathons, locked doors. Dad saw it, his eyes sometimes pleading, but Rebecca always interrupted. By 18 I was done. The penthouse felt like a museum, cold and echoing. I packed a duffel, hugged Dad goodbye in the foyer. He whispered, "I'm sorry, kiddo," and bolted for Chicago on a scholarship to Northwestern. No looking back. But what secrets had he buried in those apologies? What had he really meant? My first apartment was a shoebox in Lincoln Park. Walls thin as paper, the L train rumbling like thunder. But it was freedom. I majored in literature, worked nights shelving books at a chain store. Hands ink-stained, feet sore, but the ache was mine. Some evenings I'd stare at the skyline, wondering if Dad ever thought of me. Calls were rare, quick check-ins when Rebecca was away. How's school? Eating okay? His voice carried guilt, but bridges don't rebuild themselves. Post-grad I skipped corporate gigs. Books had saved me, why not share that? With savings and a loan, I opened Whispered Pages. A nook of creaky shelves, comfy armchairs, and the aroma of fresh pages. I named it after Mom's stories. Early days were rough. Slow foot traffic, bills stacking. But locals trickled in. A poet nursing coffee, kids for story hour, professors debating classics. I built something real, no marble required. Then one rainy April morning, as I arranged a display of thrillers, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Sophia Ellis? This is Ms. Patel, your father's assistant. He's in the hospital. Critical. Heart pounding, I closed shop, caught a flight to New York. 14 years gone, and now this. What waited in that hospital room? And why did his words from long ago echo louder? I'm sorry? The ICU reeked of bleach and despair. Rebecca blocked the door, immaculate in cashmere, her eyes narrowing. Sophia? What are you doing here? Seeing my father, I said, pushing past. He looked frail, machines beeping rhythmically. But his eyes brightened. Soph, you came. I took his hand, cold but gripping. I've missed you, I whispered. He squeezed back. Me too. I should have fixed things. But I've set something right. Secrets, you'll see. What secrets? But Rebecca hovered, nurses interrupting. She hissed in the hall, don't get ideas. You're not family anymore. I ignored her, but his words lingered, unfinished. What had he hidden? A week later he was gone. Funeral in the Hamptons. Me at the edges, Rebecca center stage with Ethan and Ava. She cornered me graveside. No inheritance for you. He moved on. But his secrets nagged. The will reading loomed Monday. What crack in her armor waited? The story's getting more and more interesting, isn't it? Don't miss out on what happens next. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Let's see what other challenges await our hero. The lawyer's office was a sleek, glass-walled suite on the 40th floor of a Chicago Loop skyscraper, the kind of place where every surface gleamed with corporate polish. I arrived early, my stomach knotted, wearing a navy dress I'd bought secondhand and flats polished to hide their scuffs. My palms were clammy, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears. The receptionist, all crisp efficiency, pointed me to a conference room with a view of Lake Michigan, its waters gray under a late March sky. Inside, Rebecca sat like a queen on her throne, her tailored blazer sharp enough to cut glass. Her twins, Ethan and Ava, flanked her. Ethan slouched, picking at his cufflinks, Ava scrolling her phone, her lips pursed in a practiced pout. A man I didn't know, broad-shouldered with a Rolex glinting, leaned close to Rebecca, murmuring. Her brother, I guessed, here to guard her victory. Rebecca's eyes met mine, her smile a razor's edge. Sophia, she said, voice dripping honey, you didn't have to come. This won't take long. I took a seat at the far end of the table, feeling the weight of their stares. The air was thick, not just with tension but with the certainty that I was an outsider here, about to be swept aside like dust. Rebecca leaned back, crossing her arms, her pearl earrings catching the light. Let's make this quick, she said as if she'd already read the script. Ethan smirked. Ava didn't look up. The man, her brother named Victor, cracked his knuckles, a subtle threat. I clasped my hands to steady them, my mind replaying Dad's hospital words. Secrets, you'll see. What had he meant? Was it hope or just another fracture in our story? The door swung open and Miss Callahan, Dad's attorney, entered. She was in her 50s with sharp gray eyes and a no-nonsense bob. She carried a leather folder, its edges worn but precise, and sat at the head of the table. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent I couldn't place. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Jonathan Ellis." Rebecca nodded, impatient like a predator scenting blood. Miss Callahan opened the folder, the rustle of paper loud in the silence. "I'll read the will in full. Please save questions for the end." She began, her tone measured. "I, Jonathan Ellis, being of sound mind, bequeath my estate, including all real property, accounts, and personal effects, to my wife, Rebecca Ellis, and our children, Ethan and Ava Ellis." Rebecca's lips curved upward, a victory lap already in motion. Ethan sat up, his smirk widening. Ava finally glanced up, her eyes flicking to me with something like pity. I didn't flinch, but my chest tightened. Was this it? Had Dad's secrets been a delusion, a dying man's wishful thinking? Miss Callahan turned the page, her expression unreadable. "The estate consists of the following: a vacation condo in Miami, a 2005 sedan, and a storage unit in Queens." The room froze. Rebecca's smile vanished, her fingers gripping the table's edge. "What?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the silence like a whip. Ethan leaned forward, brows furrowed. "That's it." Victor's face reddened, his jaw tight. Miss Callahan didn't blink. "That's what's listed in the will," she said, her tone steady as stone. Rebecca's eyes narrowed to slits. "Jonathan's estate is worth $200 million. The company, the penthouse, the investments, where are they?" I stayed silent, my heart racing. Something was coming. I'd seen it in Miss Callahan's pause, the way her fingers lingered on the folder. She pulled out a second document, thicker, sealed with a red stamp. "4 years ago," she said, "Mr. Ellis established an irrevocable trust, separate from this will and outside the probate process." Rebecca's head snapped up, her breath catching. "What trust?" she demanded. Miss Callahan's eyes flicked to me just for a moment, and I swear I saw the ghost of a smile. "The trust contains the following: all shares of Ellis Technologies, the Manhattan penthouse, the Hamptons estate, the investment portfolio, the yacht, and all associated accounts." Ava frowned, confused. "So who gets that?" she asked, her voice small. Miss Callahan's gaze settled on me, steady and deliberate. "The sole beneficiary of the trust is Sophia Ellis." The words hit like a lightning strike. Rebecca gasped, a sharp, ugly sound. Ethan slammed his fist on the table, muttering, "No way." Ava's phone clattered to the floor. Victor stood, his chair scraping. "This is fraud," he barked. "Jonathan would never." Miss Callahan slid copies of the trust across the table, each page bearing Dad's bold signature. "It's all here," she said. "Signed and notarized well before his illness." Mr. Ellis was explicit. Sophia is to inherit the trust because she shares his values and will steward his legacy. Rebecca's face was a mask of fury, her cheeks flushed crimson. "You," she hissed at me, her voice venomous. "You manipulated him, didn't you? Sneaking back when he was weak." I met her gaze, my voice quiet but firm. "I hadn't spoken to him in years until the hospital. I didn't know about this." Ethan scoffed. "Liar. You played the victim card, didn't you?" Victor leaned forward, his voice low. "We'll bury you in court." Miss Callahan didn't flinch. "The trust is ironclad. You're welcome to try, but it won't change the outcome." The room dissolved into chaos. Ethan cursed, Ava sobbed, Victor threw accusations at Miss Callahan, who remained unruffled, stacking her papers. Rebecca just stared at me, her eyes burning with a hatred I'd always known was there. I didn't gloat. There was no triumph in this, only a hollow ache for the years Dad and I had lost, mixed with a strange gratitude that he'd seen me even at the end. As they stormed out, Rebecca's heels stabbed the floor, each step a promise of retribution. Victor lingered, his glare heavy. "This isn't over," he said, then followed. Miss Callahan handed me the folder, her voice softening. "Your father believed in you, Sophia. He said you'd know what to do with this." I took the papers, my fingers brushing the inked signature. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked, almost to myself. He shrugged. "Maybe he wanted you to find your own way first." I left the office, the city's hum swallowing me. Back at whispered pages, I flipped the sign to open, the familiar creak of the door grounding me. A regular, an old professor, waved from his usual chair, oblivious to the storm in my chest. The trust was a fortune, yes, but also a weight. Dad's legacy, his apology, his faith. Somewhere, tucked in his old desk, was there a note, a clue, a final word? And what would Rebecca do next? The weeks after the will reading felt like stepping into a book I hadn't written yet, every chapter heavy with possibility and peril. I sat in whispered pages each morning, the scent of paper and coffee wrapping around me like a shield. The bookstore was my anchor, its creaky shelves and mismatched chairs a reminder of the life I'd built without marble floors or private jets. But now Dad's trust loomed, a sprawling empire of tech shares, properties, and accounts I barely understood. I wasn't ready, but his words from the hospital echoed. Secrets, you'll see. I needed to know what he'd left behind beyond the numbers. I started with Ellis Technologies. Ms. Callahan arranged a meeting at their Chicago office, a glass tower that gleamed like ambition itself. The executives greeted me with cautious smiles, their eyes sizing up the bookstore owner now holding their future. I sat through presentations on revenue streams and patents, my head spinning. But I listened, asked questions, took notes. Dad had built this from late nights and big dreams. I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. Between meetings, I kept the bookstore running, stacking shelves, hosting poetry nights, laughing with kids at story hour. The contrast was dizzying, but it kept me grounded. One gray afternoon, I flew to New York to visit Dad's old office in Manhattan. It was untouched, a time capsule of polished oak and leather-bound ledgers. His desk held traces of him, a worn pen, a faded photo of Mom tucked in a corner. I opened the top drawer, half expecting nothing, but there it was. An envelope with Sophia, scrawled in his familiar script. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Sophia, I failed you too many times. I let the noise of success drown out what mattered. This trust isn't just money, it's my belief in you. You've got your mother's heart and my stubbornness. Use them. Build something that lasts. I'm proud of you. Always was. I read it 3 times, tears blurring the ink. The words didn't erase the years apart, but they stitched something together inside me. I tucked the note in my pocket, a talisman against doubt, and left the office with a clearer sense of purpose. This wasn't about wealth. It was about carrying forward what Dad had started in my own way. Rebecca didn't vanish quietly. I'd heard whispers, through Ms. Callahan, through industry gossip, that she'd hired a legal team to contest the trust. Victor was spearheading it, claiming Dad was unduly influenced. Ethan and Ava stayed silent, their social media suddenly private. I didn't care about their moves, but I braced for impact. Ms. Callahan assured me the trust was untouchable, but Rebecca's venom wasn't about law, it was personal. Late one night, a letter arrived at the bookstore, no return address. Inside, a single line in elegant script. You'll regret taking what's mine. No signature, but I knew. I filed it away, told Ms. Callahan, and kept moving. Fear wasn't going to write my story. I started small. I met with the Ellis Technologies board, pushing for sustainable initiatives Dad had championed early on but later sidelined. I sold the yacht, too flashy for me, and funneled the money into a literacy program tied to whispered pages, offering free books to local schools. The Hamptons estate became a retreat for writers, a place where Mom's love for stories could live on. The penthouse I kept, not to live in but as a base for meetings when I was in New York. Each decision felt like a conversation with Dad, picking up where we'd left off. One evening, as I locked up the bookstore, a shadow moved across the street. A man tall, watching. Victor, a hired investigator? My pulse quickened, but I didn't run. I stared back until he slipped away. Rebecca's threat lingered, but so did Dad's note. I wasn't alone anymore. Not with his faith, not with the community I'd built. The professor waved from his chair, kids left drawings on my counter, and the poet promised a new verse tomorrow. Whispered Pages was more than a store. It was my proof that I could build, endure, thrive. Months later, Ms. Callahan called. Rebecca's lawsuit had collapsed. No evidence, no case. She'd sold the Miami condo and moved to California with the twins. Victor was still making noise, but it was just that, noise. I didn't celebrate. I felt a pang for Ethan and Ava, caught in their mother's orbit, but I let them go. My story wasn't theirs. I stood in Whispered Pages, the evening light slanting through the windows, casting shadows of bookshelves across the floor. I thought of Mom's jasmine tea, Dad's laugh, the years we'd lost. Then I thought of the kids who'd read their first book here, the writers finding their voice, the empire I was learning to steer. I unlocked the door, flipped the sign to open, and whispered to the empty air, I see the secrets now, Dad. I'll make you proud. Hey everyone. Thanks for tuning into the Revenge Tempest channel. If you love this story, please hit that subscribe button and join our amazing community. Drop a comment below letting us know where you watched us from. Your support keeps us going. Stay tuned for more epic tales.